Vibrance Academy, the lab where hits are born. In a world of noise, clarity is the ultimate power. Behind every headline is a story waiting to be unraveled, a truth waiting to be told. At Vibrance Academy of Creative Arts, we turn curiosity into a craft. Master the art of the interview, the ethics of the scoop, and the precision of the prose. From the heat of the breaking story to the depth of the long-form feature, learn to lead the conversation. Vibrance Academy Journalism. Be the voice that matters.
The classroom held the particular stillness of mid-morning, when the sun had cleared the tree line and settled into its long arc across the sky. Rows of desks faced the front, their surfaces scarred with the accumulated graffiti of years, each carved initial and doodled figure a small monument to the boredom that had passed through this space. The students sat in those desks, 30 bodies arranged in 5 neat columns, their postures varying from slumped to rigid, their gazes fixed on the figure at the front of the room. The substitute teacher stood at the chalkboard. The figure was tall and thin, dressed in clothing the color of old paper, the fabric hanging in folds that revealed nothing of the body beneath. The hair was gray, the precise shade of pencil lead, cut short and neat against a skull that never turned. The hand held a piece of chalk, the standard-issued white cylinder, and this hand moved across the board in a continuous, unbroken line. The writing had begun the moment the figure entered the room. No introduction had been offered. No attendance had been taken. The figure had simply walked to the board, picked up the chalk, and begun to write. The students had waited for the inevitable turning, for the face to reveal itself, for the first words of instruction to emerge from the mouth that remained hidden behind the back of that unmoving head. The wait continued. The boy in the third row watched the chalk move. His eyes traced the letters as they formed, words in a language he did not recognize, symbols that hovered at the edge of familiarity without ever resolving into meaning. The script was elegant but alien, each character connected to the next by flowing lines that seemed to breathe as they were drawn. The chalk produced its characteristic sound, a soft scraping that should have varied with the pressure of the hand, the angle of the stroke, the texture of the board beneath. But the sound did not vary. It remained constant, a single note sustained without change, without pause, without breath. The board filled. Line by line, the writing progressed from left to right, top to bottom, the hand moving with mechanical precision, never hesitating, never correcting, never pausing to consider the next word. The first line reached the edge of the board and continued onto the next. The second line followed. The third. The board's surface became a palimpsest of white on green, layers of script overlapping and intersecting, the earlier words visible through the later ones like ghosts haunting the same space. The air in the classroom changed. The temperature dropped, not suddenly but gradually, a slow seepage of cold that began at the front of the room and spread backward desk by desk. The boy's breath became visible, a thin mist that formed before his face and dissipated in the growing chill. Beside him, a girl pulled her arms tighter against her chest, her fingers gripping the fabric of her sleeves, her eyes never leaving the figure at the board. The chalk reached the bottom of the board. The hand did not stop. It continued its motion, writing now on the wooden frame that bordered the slate, the chalk leaving its white trail on the painted surface. The sound remained the same, that constant scrape, that single note, filling the room with its insistence. The frame filled, line by line, the writing spilling over onto the wall beyond, onto the pale green paint that covered the cinder block. A girl near the window shifted in her seat. The motion drew the boy's attention, and he turned to look at her. Her face was pale, paler than the cold could account for, her eyes wide and fixed on the front of the room. She was not breathing. He watched her chest, waiting for the rise and fall that never came. And in that moment of observation, he realized that no one in the room was breathing. The 30 bodies in their 5 neat columns sat utterly still, their chests motionless, their mouths closed, their eyes reflecting the endless motion of the chalk. The boy's own breath caught in his throat. He tried to inhale and found the air thick, resistant, as if the room had filled with something denser than atmosphere. The cold pressed against his skin, deeper now, reaching through his clothing to touch the flesh beneath. The chalk continued its scrape, its single note, its eternal song of marking on surfaces that could not hold it. The writing reached the window. The hand did not turn, did not acknowledge the change in medium, simply continued its motion across the glass. The chalk left its trail on the pane, white against the gray morning light, the symbols appearing backward from the outside, forward from within. The window filled, line by line, the script spreading across the glass like frost forming in reverse. The figure's arm began to change. The motion continued, the hand still riding, but the arm itself grew longer, thinner, the fabric of the sleeve stretching to accommodate an elongation that had no natural limit. The elbow passed the point where an elbow should stop, the forearm extending toward the wall, the hand still moving, still writing, still producing that endless stream of symbols that no one could read. A student stood up. The boy did not see who, only registered the motion in his periphery, the scrape of a chair against the floor, the sudden vertical presence amid the seated rows. The standing figure took a step toward the front, then another, moving through the cold air with a deliberation that seemed divorced from thought. Another student rose. Another. The classroom became a field of standing figures, their faces blank, their eyes fixed on the writing hand, their bodies moving forward in a slow, collective march. The boy remained seated. His body would not move, would not rise, would not join the procession that now filled the aisles between desks. The cold had reached his bones, had frozen the joints, had turned his muscles to something that no longer responded to the commands of his will. He could only watch as the others advanced, as they reached the front of the room, as they surrounded the figure that still wrote, still wrote, still wrote. The figure did not turn, did not acknowledge the students who now stood inches from its back, their faces inches from that unmoving head, their breath misting in the air that grew colder with each passing moment. The hand continued its motion, the chalk still scraping, the symbols still flowing onto the wall, onto the window, onto the surfaces of the desks nearest the front. One of the students, reached out, a hand, pale and trembling, extended toward the figure's shoulder. The fingers approached the fabric of that paper-colored sleeve, the distance shrinking inch by inch, the contact inevitable and terrible and impossible to stop. The boy watched from his frozen seat. The hand touched the shoulder. The figure did not react. The hand pressed deeper, the fingers sinking into the fabric, into the space where a body should have been, and finding nothing. The sleeve collapsed inward, empty, the arm still moving, the hand still writing, the chalk still scraping its single note against a world that could not contain it. The boy's body found motion at last, not the motion of standing, of joining the others, of approaching that empty sleeve and the hand that wrote without ceasing, the motion of turning, of looking away, of seeking any other focus for eyes that had seen too much. The back of the room offered nothing but the door, closed and dark, its small window revealing only the empty hallway beyond. The windows on the far wall showed the schoolyard, empty and still, the swings motionless, the trees bare against the gray sky. Nothing moved out there. Nothing offered escape. Behind him, the scraping continued, the single note, the endless song, and beneath it now, a new sound, the soft whisper of fabric collapsing, of empty sleeves settling against empty air, of a figure that had never been there at all continuing its eternal task.